And we'd like you to just kind of provide an overview of data privacy in Wisconsin and DPI's role. And then Brian, if you could kind of be on deck there with the same kind of question as it applies to your school district, that'd be great.
Sure, no problem. Thank you. So in general, over the past number of years, DPI's role has been to provide guidance to LEAs around student data, privacy, and confidentiality. In 2009, we wrote and received a grant to build out our statewide longitudinal data system. It had been started in a prior grant, but this is the grant that really pushed us forward in building that data warehouse. And with that, we also built a lot of tools for then LEAs to access securely the data that we were already collecting for then improvement planning purposes. So we started providing a lot more value back to districts with this grant. And as part of that, we built into that grant a pupil data privacy officer, and they started looking at all of the things related to WISE to make sure that we were putting in place all those security and privacy controls that we needed to. Since then, we have always had a person at DPI to focus on those pieces, especially for the WISE systems that we've built out over the last 10 years, and then also to help the LEAs statewide. So as an agency, we do look to the Data Quality Campaign, the DQC, for the acronym, if I say that later on, and the Privacy and Technical Assistance Center, also known as PTAC, for updates and guidance. I'd like to start with a legislative view from a national perspective. The DQC tracks for us the legislation nationwide, and their most recent focus has been on how data is used to help students. And with that, in 2018 and 19, they saw a lot of potential bills nationwide around collecting, using, protecting, and sharing education data to help students succeed. So over time, we are definitely seeing a lot more bills being introduced across all of the states. From a Wisconsin perspective, we had a legislative council study in 2016. They wanted to look at DPI, see how we were collecting data, see all the things we were putting into place to protect that data. And at the end of the study, they were very impressed with DPI's work around privacy and security. At the end of the study, they created a nice summary of everything that was going on, and they did recommend 2 bills. Essentially, the bills would have put into law all of the good work we were already doing with schools and districts and within our own agency. The bill did not end up moving forward, but we do continue the work that we're doing regardless of having those bills or not. So one way that we do provide guidance back to school districts is by pulling together resources and training on our privacy page. So if you haven't seen it yet, we have that link at the end of the presentation so that you guys can take a look at our privacy page. But we try to pull together other resources from those organizations so it's in one place for all of you to use. Besides that, another way that DPI has provided guidance is by facilitating access to very specific resources like the Student Data Privacy Consortium or the SDPC. Annette has helped to lead that since she started at DPI, and it's a great service for districts across the state. So before I end, I did want to note that internally, our privacy and security plan is tied to our governance structure, which we based off of the PTAC data governance checklist. And we really feel that's our foundation to then move forward with data privacy and security components at DPI.
Great, thanks, Melissa. Brian, could you kind of take what the question and put a spin on it, and kind of what's your role in data privacy from your position, from a school district lens?
Well, going back a number of years, I think we found that every district was doing things slightly differently. Some people were sharing ideas and methods. The bottom line comes down to school districts contracting with vendors to provide an educational service, whether that's an SIS, LMS, learning software, you name it. My guess is probably every district has hundreds of vendors that they deal with. And oftentimes it's just sort of an SLA agreement or other things that they have you sign. And I don't think, going back like 6 or 7 years ago, we were quite savvy enough to understand all the ramifications of signing these agreements. So we started looking at that. What are the expectations that we would have from a vendor regarding data security, regarding notification, regarding the destruction of data, all of those things that really make up data privacy that we were not asking vendors. We started to get into that realm. So what's evolved to today is the National Data Privacy Consortium, and the Wisconsin version of that gives us a framework and a really excellent contract. I think we'll probably talk about that coming up, where everyone can be on the same page and we can get that contract out and get it signed. Getting people to sign is another issue, and I think we'll hopefully talk about that soon. There's also the enormous number of free software and apps and other things out there that educators want to use. It's very difficult to get agreements signed when it's a free service. So as part of this whole data privacy process, and Stephen's point, we came up with a vetting process where every piece of software that collects any student information has to be approved. And we have a process that's defined about how we look at those things. And the gold standard for us now is if we get this data privacy contract signed, we're good to go. If it's something that we have a vendor that's free and it's a valuable app, we can allow it with conditions. You know, our system, basically it's approved or it's not. If it's approved, we list it on a website. It's available to educators, parents, anyone can see what we've approved and if there are conditions on that approval. I've been impressed lately too with the number of vendors that are even providing free services that are willing to sign these agreements. So that's a really positive step. Overall, the bottom line for K-12 school districts is whether you like it or not, whether you feel that you don't have the personnel or time to do these activities or put in the work, you have to, because you're on the hook. The minute a teacher decides to fire up a free app and starts putting student information in there, if something happens, it's going to come back on the district. So we're doing everything we can here. We think we have a good model. You're never done. That's what I keep telling people too. It's not like I just checked this off. I did mention before, well, now I'm thinking cybersecurity. Doesn't mean we're done with data privacy. We're always looking at how we can do it better, efficiently, trying to learn from other districts. The best ideas out there are usually someone else's to begin with. It's rare you have this epiphany and you come up with something completely original. And that's the whole strength behind this consortium, is that you have a collective response and a collective way to respond to vendors. So we have our own vetting process, and I think that can still be local in terms of how people want to present it on a web page. I know a lot of districts are leveraging the Data Privacy Consortium itself as a way to list that. They're using third-party vendors. ClassLink is one I know. I think Hudson is doing with Jen, and I've also heard of Learn Platform is another option if you pay for those services. So locally, you can decide how you want to respond to all those free apps and other things of your vetting process. But I think at a state level, and probably the best thing that we have right now is this Data Privacy Consortium with some real powerful language, a clear process, and a real easy way for every district to jump in and join that.
Great, thanks, Ryan. And we will kind of unpack that consortium here in just a little bit. And one thing that came up yesterday is there'll be a lot of requests for links, and a lot of this is already linked at the end of the presentation. But if there is anything that is called out during one of our presenters' time, we will certainly make sure we link those in for you so that you have those. And we'll unpack that Student Data Privacy Consortium here in just a few minutes. But I've also just been told that Diane Dorsch has joined us. So Diane, can you do a quick check-in with us?
Certainly. I apologize for my tardiness. I've had meetings all the way up to this point. I'm Diane Dorsch. I'm former classroom teacher, director of technology in NENA, then former chief technology and information officer for Green Bay Area Public Schools. I retired from there for a weekend, and now I work for Digital Promise, which is national, and I work with leaders who are getting one-to-one LTE-enabled devices into their middle schools. And so I'm still doing a lot of the same work. Some of the things I still work on are student data privacy as well.
Great, glad you could join us, Diane. We're gonna move to our next question.
You wanted to answer?
Oh, sure, we can have her answer that one.
Yeah.
So Diane, I don't know if you caught the conversation, but we asked Melissa to kind of give an overview of data privacy in Wisconsin and her role. And I would ask Brian did the same thing. What was your role when you were with Green Bay? Like, what was your responsibility as far as data privacy?
Sure. Well, as in Green Bay, as we started having teachers requesting apps for iPads at that time, and then later Google extensions, legal counsel said to me, Diane, kids are adding or asked to add so much private information. we really need to have agreements with each of the service providers who are creating these apps so that we have assurances that they're keeping our student data safe. And at that time, and I'm talking 2013, there was not a lot of work done on this. And so I did some searching and found that the Student Data Privacy Consortium was just getting started by A4L, Steve Smith, Larry Fruth, out in Cambridge, Massachusetts. And so I called and bothered them a lot to find out, well, what should I be paying attention to? And then I found some others within the state, like Brian Casey, who I could collaborate with because he was working on the same things. And I think early on, you know, Brian and I did a lot of searching regarding what was going on in different places, and we started kind of banding together and co-presenting, sharing our journey as we move forward with student data privacy and getting agreements, creating an app vetting process and all those different things. And then as time went on, there were just more and more people with more questions. And so again, I think with the help of DPI, Melissa, you know, the whole group, it's kind of like, okay, let's get our resources into one place with the addition of Annette and Ed. You know, again, now a real intentional, what can I say, coalition of people working on the same thing, because this is something that you cannot do alone. And I think Brian and I found that out very early on. For each one of us to try to get an agreement with vendors of apps, and at that time educate them on what FERPA is, why student data privacy is important, and all those things took a lot of time. And so we learned early on, let's band together, let's split the work and share the resources and the agreements that we have so that as a state we can move together. And I've really appreciated the efforts of DPI to help kind of put us all into that same place so that all our efforts are working together.
Thanks so much, Diane. Appreciate your kind words. All right, we're going to move on to the next question. And in this question, we're going to start with Brian. We're going to go to Diane, and then we're going to go to Melissa. So why do you need to pay attention to data privacy? And Brian, if you could kick us off, that'd be great.
Well, I mean, I think I was at a COSIN conference or something a number of years ago, might have been 2012, 2013, and I was just kicking around, what are we doing with this and what does this mean? And I heard a presenter talk and say, data privacy has the potential to undermine everything we're doing with technology. So if you can imagine, if there are numerous breaches where student information is exposed, how school boards, communities, parents would react to how we're handling student data. It dawned on me that really this is integral to what we're doing. We have to be able to tell people that we know what data is being collected, where it is, how it's being handled, and then we have some sort of framework to approve things. So I kind of refer to that time period as the Wild West, where we were just promoting technology and use it for everything. Here's an app, there's an app for this, there's an app for that, or this is great, it's free. And we didn't really have a process. So the why is, you know, we're in the business of educating K-12 students, and we rely on trust. We rely on the communities that trust us to deliver that education. And any kind of a data breach that happens, we have to be prepared to say, we did everything possible. You're not going to prevent every breach from happening. In fact, the majority of them you probably won't be able to, but how you react to it needs to be supported by the work that you've done to approve apps and have a process and have a plan for dealing with a potential data breach. So that's the why, really, and it's very important. I know this takes time. No one likes to, you know, think about looking through contracts or contacting a million vendors and, you know, haranguing them for agreements, but it's very, very important. It's worth our time.
I appreciate that, Brian. I appreciate your comments there. Diane, would you like to take a shot at the question?
Sure. Nobody wants to be a leader at a school that gets breached and then makes the front page news. If you search the internet for recent school district data breaches, you'll find a bunch of them. In the old days, it used to be finding IEP, you know, papers and files in dumpsters behind schools. And now we've got, you know, electronic repositories of student data everywhere now that we've gone to cloud-based, you know, services. And so having those agreements is so very important because, again, you know, bad people are going to find ways to get to stuff. But if you're a school district who does not have a process in place for these things or doesn't know how to react to these things, it is the loss of the community's trust. It's the loss of your school board's trust. And, you know, it will take a long time to gain their trust back. And so making sure that you're letting your community know that you do see this as being an important and integral part of education in this digital age is important. Another thing I want to say is looking to the future now regarding the pieces of information that are collected on students. You know, there's such a thing as artificial intelligence. There are data lakes. I'm sure Melissa can talk much more about this. But what I'm saying is data that is being collected, you know, could be stored somewhere and sit around for a very, very long time. And we don't know in the future how this data may impact the future of our students. And so being very cognizant of what is being collected and where it's being stored, and always thinking about the fact that there are people with bad intentions out there who want to get a hold of this data, really does kind of raise awareness and should raise awareness moving forward. I'm really, you know, thinking that as we know, or we've learned on the dark web, student information, child information is the most valuable information out there because people with bad intentions can steal identities and use that information for many, many years before the student maybe applies for student loans or for a loan for a car or a house, and then finds out that their credit and other things have been ruined. And so, you know, we found that that's a story that really piques, what can I say, the awareness in teachers to say, hey, you need to be careful with what you have your students sign up for. This is why you need to pay attention to what your district is allowing regarding resources, because if you don't, this could happen to your students. And so I guess I will say, just looking to the future and data that's out there, we want to make sure that it's not going to impact our students in a negative way.
Yeah, thanks, Diane. What I pulled out of that, your comments were that data that is, you know, either compromised or sacrificed today may not necessarily be harmful today. It may be down the road. So thank you for sharing that. Melissa?
Sure, thank you. So we all have a part to play. We all have a responsibility to protect our students and our staff to maintain the privacy and security of data. Even someone who may not think they have a role to play, they do. They could answer the phone and inadvertently give out information. Customer services could reply to a ticket in a way that compromises private student data privacy. So everyone does have a role. And we need to make sure that everybody understands that, so that we all have it in the back of our minds what we can do to help out. There is a lot to do, and it needs to be taken into consideration because we need to have a plan so that we can move forward step by step instead of ignoring it because it's so big. We need to create that plan, prioritize it, and take steps towards the security and privacy, knowing that it's never done, but at least knowing that this is what we want to take a look at. We're planning for it, we're moving forward, and again, doing the best we can to maintain the privacy and security of student data.
Great, thanks, Melissa. I think we're going to take a small pause here. I think we have a couple of questions we're going to try and get to. Annette, would you mind running through the questions?
So the first one comes from CISA 9, and I think this would go to Diane and Brian. How do you police staff that do not just use programs that use programs that are not on the approved vendor list?
So let's go Brian first, then Diane.
So at the most basic level, it's in our board policy, which states all software has to be approved. We
I
have
just got
a
on and
way.
it's Diane and Brian talking.
Hold on just a
But they're
second.
talking about
If you could mute your microphone if you're not,
privacy and like,
that would be great. Okay.
So the first level is your board policy. That's what the district does. You have to educate people about the process. And you especially have to educate people that are in any kind of decision-making capability to purchase or recommend software. That's that's the most important level. Secondly, I mean, there's technical ways. We don't allow local admin rights. They can't install anything. We've locked down the Google environment. They can't add extensions. Doesn't prevent, someone from going out to the web and, using, web-based resource. It's not perfect, but obviously that's what we do. And of course, part of that is the education, that everyone who's in technology knows that and supports it. If they become aware of someone using something unsupported, we notify them and we immediately intervene. Like I said, it's not foolproof, but nothing is really. I mean, when we're talking about all of these things, you're not going to get 100%. I'll go for the 98 or 99.99. And that's the best that we can do. It's working for us. I really don't feel that we have a huge problem with rogue implementation of software. Again, another thing that we do is we make sure that when we onboard new staff that they're made aware of these policies. And we do remind staff whenever we have the opportunity in district communications or PD events that all software has to be approved, and we can direct them right to a website. It's all right there. It's pretty easy to understand. And also the process for requesting approval is right there. We're in the process of revamping that too. It's getting old. We've done this for, 6, 7 years. Always looking for new solutions, better ways to do it. And that's why I reach out to my colleagues and, I hear different things that people are doing and always looking to make it better.
Great, thanks, Brian. And just for everybody on the webinar, Annette's taking notes and putting them into the question doc. So this will be a great resource. Those answers are being captured. Diane, would you be willing to chime in on the question? Diane, you are muted.
Yeah, talking to myself again. So first of all, the question about policing, we hope we don't have to get that far. COSN has something called the Trusted Learning Environment, and I really like that title because, we need to be trusted by our community. We need to be able to trust our teachers. Teachers need to be able to trust the administration and the Department of Technology because we're all in this together. It really does start with education and really open and honest dialogue. I have to say in Green Bay, this took a number of years, and Brian would probably say the same thing. He's talking about revamping and new iterations of things. That's because it's taken this long, probably at least 2 to 3 years to have student data privacy be part of those learning conversations that take place in a school district and at the board level and, amongst your administrators and around the superintendent's table and things like that. So building your processes and getting, plans in place for people to follow when they are requesting apps, when they have concerns about apps, those types of things is going to take a while. But I think that will help so that you don't have to police because, it's almost too late when you have to start doing that. I mean, if you want to get, and I really like Brian's technical solutions as well, if you, absolutely do not want something like a website being used in your district, you can always blacklist it. But there are different things along the way. Brian had mentioned a few at the beginning where there are some solutions that school districts use. They could use ClassLink to see what apps kids are using from the launcher. They can use something like Catch On, which has an agent that supports, you know, taking a look at what the students are using. Learn Platform does something similar to that. In Green Bay, we just surveyed our teachers. We said, what are you using in the classroom? And then we started, and this was back in 2013, 2014, we started looking at the most used apps and then exploring the terms of service and privacy policy and going from there. And I guess the biggest thing that you want to do, even before you start considering websites or apps or extensions that teachers want to use, ask the question, the most important question first. Is it good for learning? Because if it's not good for learning, it's not worth your time to go through the vetting process. So we always make sure that we involve our curriculum department and have them look at the resources first. And that's how you build a trusted learning environment. If you're interested in seeing what a trusted learning environment school district looks like, that is a seal that school districts can work toward, and you can find that on the COSN website under Trusted Learning Environment.
And we, Diane, have added information on that to the end of the slide deck, so there's
Awesome.
links. And then additionally, we just wanted to communicate out to the group that DPI thinks it's important that we have trusted learning environments. And so we as an agency are working closely with COSN to go through that process too. So it's that not just the districts have to have that, but who you partner with and work with, you need to know what they're doing so that you can feel confident that they're not going to do something to share your students' information. So we're working on a pilot right now with COSN and going through the process. It's not something that you do quickly. We've been working on the pilot for over a year just to get the criteria in place, but it's not expensive. It is doable. It just takes the time and commitment to be able to work through the policies and procedures, and that guidance really already is helping us to think about what do we need to do differently.
Did you want to do another question, or should we move on to the next CAN one?
Yeah, because I'm going to do two more quickly. One, Brian, we've been asked if you would share your vetting process, and I know you just said that you are revamping it. Would you be willing to share that with DPI once it's revamped so we can put it out to the group?
Absolutely. You know, we have a Google form. It's on the website. If you go to the Stevens Point Area Public School District, you can see it. Or if you want me to send you a copy, I certainly will via email. It's a basic Google form. I'm revamping the form because I think it asks the wrong questions. So we still get requests in and we process. We need to crystallize that a little bit better in terms of what we need to process a request. We get a request. We created kind of a flow chart of the process of how we vet things. Looking at it, number one, is this something that's going to be purchased by the district? And if it is purchased, we have a lot of leverage to get that data privacy contract signed. That's what we do starting off with that. If it's not something that's going to be purchased, it's something that they're going to use for free, then we start looking at what does that app or application do? Question number one, does it collect any data? We get requests in from teachers we've trained them so well. Some of them, it's like they ask us about every website and everything on the internet. Well, if it doesn't collect any data, it's just something that they're going to and visiting. We don't have to worry about it. And sometimes we list that as approved just to kind of reassure people. If it does collect student data, then we look at what does it collect, what are the rules that they're going to establish. If it's something that we're being told by our curriculum department, like what Diane said, or educational leaders, or it's part of what they're doing and it's important in the classroom, we can approve it with conditions. Usually those conditions apply to getting parental consent if they're under 13. I'm not really comfortable with approving something I don't agree with. So even then, it may be that there's something that someone feels has educational value, but if they don't have safe practices, they don't have data privacy policies or terms of use that make sense, we won't approve it. But we are willing to approve things that, you know, require parental consent. And we have a number of those. That's probably the biggest sticking point, where it's something you're being told by a principal or by teachers, well, we really love this, it works great for us. And I say, well, until they sign that privacy agreement, the only way we can allow you to use this is if you notify parents and get consent from them, which is very messy. And we want to figure out a better way to do that. And obviously moving to the Data Privacy Consortium gives us the best potential to move as many of these types of apps onto that, where we can just basically say, we're good to go. They've agreed to all of our terms. We can certify this.
Thank
Can I
you.
bring up a point as well?
Absolutely.
As Brian talked about curricular materials, a lot of textbooks still, or textbook companies, have resources. And so we have found that, you know, the curriculum department is always vetting resources. And it was our superintendent in Green Bay who said, if there's a component that is technology, the Department of Technology must be included right away. And so what we had is a pre-screen form. And that meant when our curriculum department was looking at different resources, even to bring them in to see if, you know, they can demonstrate and see what their product is about. I had this pre-screen sheet that asked, you know, do your resources use student data? What aspects of student data are you using? Where is it stored? All that kind of stuff. Because if they can't answer that stuff right away, we would not even let them into the school district to get your curriculum people, your teachers all excited about the resource. And so that's kind of, you know, what can I say, something you can insert into your process, because the company wants to get into your school district. And so put this right up front so that they have to answer those things right away. And if they can't, maybe you shouldn't be looking at them as a resource. And so if any of you out there, I guess, you know, talk with superintendents or our superintendents, I can't stress enough how important it is that your superintendent make sure that technology, the Department of Technology is included in right away in the vetting process, because I have many colleagues in the state of Wisconsin and throughout the United States who end up, you know, being told, we bought a resource, you need to make this work. And by that time, it's too late. And so, and it could be a lot of money down the drain because it's been purchased and will not work technically in your district. So keep that in mind as well.
I'd just like to piggyback off of that, because we borrowed that concept from Green Bay. It's an excellent concept, and we struggled with that for years. You know, and you could beg and plead with them, please let us know. And we'd always tried to get people involved in the process. Well, that's too complicated for most curriculum departments. So if you have a form, here's the expectations, answer these questions, and then report back to technology. That's what we have now. So everyone in curriculum, everyone that's purchasing curriculum materials has access to that. That's just part of the process. So, you know, it's really helped, and they can bring that right up front with any vendor they're dealing with, and we have a heads up on what's coming, and they should be able to answer those questions. If they can't, that's a big red flag to the people that are making the decisions. Also, if you do have that scenario now where all of a sudden they say, we purchased this, we can go back to them and say, well, you didn't follow our district process. I mean, we needed the pre-screen done. You shouldn't have signed on the dotted line here yet. We're not ready. So then we have also additional leverage to maybe go back, and, you know, it's awfully tough to get people to sign data privacy agreements once they have a 3 to 5 year contract signed and they got their money. Most vendors, I would say, are ethical, and they're willing to work with you if you're a customer, but it makes it a heck of a lot easier if at the get-go they understand that that's a condition for doing business with the district. So again, that's a great example of where we've collaborated and shared ideas, and the best ideas you can borrow from someone else.
Great, thanks. Do we have any more questions at this time?
We do, but let's keep going and
All
we'll
right.
come back to them.
So this question, we're going to go in the order of Diane, Melissa, then Brian. How do you practice data privacy in your district? So Diane, when you were still with Green Bay, how did you practice data privacy?
Sure. That's a big one. We can start way at the top level and move down. making sure that this is on the radar of your superintendent and your Board of Education is important and key. Keeping them informed of, you know, what you're moving toward, the expectations, maybe even giving them, you know, some articles or examples of school districts where bad things have happened, and saying, you know, this, we don't want this to be our district. And so, you know, getting that awareness at the top is so important, so it becomes part of the expectation and the fabric in which your school district runs. Talking to your administrators, helping them understand the importance of student data privacy so they have expectations for their teachers as well. You know, and, you know, as they do their walkthrough and they see kids using apps or going to websites, asking those questions, have you gone through the vetting process for this? How do you use this site? Is it educationally sound? All those types of things could be really good conversations with your principals and your teachers. Students. Teachers helping students understand what it's like to be a digital citizen and how much information should be given out and to whom. Those are practices that should take place every day. And it's interesting, I think about always, I put through things through the lens of my mom on Facebook. It's like, what does she need to know? Because I don't want her doing stupid stuff. We should have that same type of love and concern for our students as well. And I can't tell you how many times we've taught things to our staff members and they're like, I should probably share this with my mom and dad because they need to know this stuff. And so having that family member type of concern for all who deal with data, information, and privacy is important. And then also making sure that the expectations are followed through upon. And so, you know, if there are practices in place and somebody goes beyond the guardrails, is someone going to have a conversation with them? And that could be colleague to colleague, that could be student to teacher. That's what I'm learning, you know, as I work nationally now. There are sometimes students who remind teachers about some things about student data privacy. And that's the kind of environment we should have, where everyone has everyone's back. Keeping it at the forefront of your conversations, vetting things, looking at purchases through that lens of student data privacy is so important. And one way, I guess, that could be helpful, but also the bane of a tech leader's existence sometimes, is putting yourself into the purchasing strand through, you know, as school districts purchase things, if it has to do with technology, you having the approval on those things, because, you know, that's where the money goes. And if you, and it's too bad that it has to get that far, but that might be a way to modify some behaviors that have been bypassing the system. So again, I think thinking that we're all in this together, because we truly are, and we're looking out for each other is key to practicing data privacy in your district.
Thanks so much, Diane. Melissa, how about from the state lens?
Sure. I'll just give a couple of examples of some of the things we've implemented over the past 10 years or so. We do have annual security and privacy training for all of our staff here at DPI. We also have included that in onboarding. So when somebody starts, they're trained right away. Even if we are not sure if they'll ever touch student data or staff data, we still have them get training on PII and what it is and what to look for in case they see something. One of the biggest efforts we've done with our data governance kind of hierarchy and program here is build out our data stewards list. So we started from the bottom, where we wanted to document for every single kind of topic of data who our contacts were at DPI for any policy decisions, the person we could go to ask any questions or notify if we needed to talk through an issue, as well as for our own use, the folks we can go to for kind of testing the data and quality assurance and things like that as well. So we have a very large data stewards document, and it has been used so much over the past couple of years to really connect with our program areas around the data that they steward. And I also want to call out that I did say steward, because we are not owners of any of the data that we have. It's assessment scores from our students, it's enrollment data, it's all of this data that is not ours, but we're a steward of the data. So we need to protect it, because again, it's that trusted learning environment where we have to show that even though it's not our data, it's yours, and we want to protect it and do what we can to ensure that it will stay confidential. As part of that, we have an access request process at DPI. So the people around DPI who do need to access the data for a legitimate educational need can request that access. We will vet to make sure that they are asking for the right access. I'll just give a scenario where we have people who are like, hey, I need direct access to the WiseDash data warehouse. I'm like, no, you don't. You need access to WiseDash in this specific role, because this is what you need to do for your job within what you're doing to help our students. So we make sure that people are getting the right access to the right data for the right reasons. With that, the WiseDash rules come into play too, because over time, WiseDash has expanded as to what's available for our schools and districts. And every time we add more data to it, we have to look at those roles to make sure that we are protecting the data. So for example, we have a summary role, we have a detail role, and an economic indicator role, and that's what we started with. But since then, we've added FAFSA data, we've added homeless data, we've added all these different things that we have to decide then, is there a new role? Is this something that multiple people in a district should access? And every time we do, we have that conversation around DPI and to create the best role for our schools and districts so you can access the data you need, but not things you may not need. So those are some of the things we've been working on over the past couple of years to make sure that we are moving forward with data security and privacy related to kind of the WISE systems and some of our tools that we have.
Great, thanks, Melissa. Brian?
One of the things I've seen where there's a nexus now is a lot of the discussion about student safety and security. We're talking about digital safety and security, and I think one of the ways that you can use to communicate this to the leadership in your district, your superintendent, directors, school board, is to frame it in that light. I think a lot of times, people's eyes glaze over when you start talking data privacy and SIPA and COPPA and FERPA, and it's mostly like regulatory compliance. Well, this is more than just complying with laws and regulation. We've seen some really bad things happen when data gets compromised and stolen. School districts have been extorted, threatening to reveal IEPs or disciplinary records on kids. I mean, really bad things can happen. Of course, and no parent likes the thought of their kindergartner's identity being stolen. No district leader wants to be in the position of having to communicate to the public that happened. And also, by the way, we didn't do a lot of the things we could have done that are relatively simple to do. I'm not going to kid anyone. This is work. It's a commitment. You have to dedicate a certain amount of time to setting it up, to maintaining, to doing the work that's required, but it's very important work. Some of the things I think I wrote down as I was listening to Diane and Melissa, you have to have a realistic process, just like with cybersecurity and physical security. The more you tighten and lock things down, the more pushback you're going to get from people. So you have to think what's real, what's doable, what's realistic in your situation. You have to educate people about the why. If people don't understand why you're all of a sudden, preventing them from downloading software, you have to explain why that's being done. And you have to communicate that to people in a way that makes sense. And I think we've always framed things, in Stephen's point, that we're doing this to protect students. Number one, that's our job. We protect them when they walk in the physical doors of the building, but there's also a digital landscape out there that we are going to do everything within our power to protect them from anything bad that can happen to them. With the understanding that, it's not always going to be 100%. We also don't want to overpromise there, but part of it is we did everything that we know how to do, and we also have a process in place if we do get hit with something. And lastly, I think it's important, I'm in this stage right now where you review things. If you're going to keep doing data privacy, this is not a one and done. You don't check it off your list and move on. You have to be continually looking for ways to get better. And one of the best ways to get better is to continue to learn about it. Attending this webinar, for example, or when you're at a conference, you go to CoCenter, you go to a Weedle, CTO clinic, whatever, brainstorm, whatever it is, you seek out the opportunity and just try and stay abreast of what's changing and what some good possibilities might be for your district. That's all I have to say on that.
I want to piggyback off of what all three of you said a little bit. And also you're kind of answering some of the questions that are in the document. I'm trying to fill in answers as we go. Somebody asked about, are we doing training at regional CNI meetings or brainstorm? And Brian really mentioned staying up to date. So DPI is doing things like offering this 2-day event. There is the CTO clinic that is coming up with Weedle. So partnering with Weedle to have a tabletop exercise. The link's at the end of this agenda. Also, we are working hard to do presentations. So you're going to see a presentation at the School Business Officers Conference in March. You're going to see a presentation at the School District Administrators Conference in April. We've been asked now to we're going to have quite a bit around privacy at WISE Data, at the WISE Data Conference, privacy and security. We have worked with those professional organizations, including ASA, WASBO, WASDA, I'm missing one, school boards. You'll start seeing some very short tips and tricks in their monthly newsletters. We'll be doing some webinars with them. We're putting together a 5-minute overview of SDPC to go out on their websites. So those partnerships are happening, and you will start to see those things going out across the state. We do have a presentation at Brainstorm, but not on this topic. We are trying to get into more and more of the conversations. And again, like I see someone's putting the links into the back channel. They're also in the slide deck. So if you have the slide deck, all of these are resources at the very end. The other question that came up, can I throw in a question, Ed?
Absolutely.
Maybe start with Melissa, I'm not sure. It says, when you talk about finding out what data is collected on the student with the various apps, website services, what data is considered to be the most concerning? And then they split this in two, for students under the age of 13 or over the age of 13. So it's not just enough to know, do they collect data, but what data and where's the line?
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to take that one first, Melissa?
Sure, I can add a little bit there. I mean, for us and for everybody, most importantly, it should be SSN. I mean, that should be a huge red flag if anybody is asking to collect SSN of a student. It's not needed to use any of these apps or any of the different ones that people are trying to use for curriculum type purposes in the classroom. So that would be a huge red flag. Student PII is always, I know we have directory data too, so sometimes there's a balance there, but anything with PII where they can be identified as an individual, student address, for example, those are things that we really need to take a look at. As far as other data, we are going to be starting, we did classify or inventory the data that we collect in the WISE data collections a number of years ago, needs to be updated. And as part of that effort, we're going to start doing data classification. And we have a standard stack that has been approved by our cabinet level of how we're going to go through and classify every single piece of data. And I know that activity will help us answer this question a little bit more, but I would say that just initial reaction is obviously the SSN and then the student PII. I'll add one more too before we pass it along. Discipline data, anything regarding student discipline data, there's different laws around that, and I'll add one more, economic data. Sorry, I keep thinking of other ones as we go along. Discipline data and economic data, and probably disability data are some of the top ones that come up here where we need to have additional conversations and think more about how that data is being used and who's accessing it. So in summary, I think I said SSN, student PII, like address data, the disability data, the economic data,
Birth
and
dates.
yes, birth date, things like that. So those are the things that I would look at initially, but that's not the entire list. And again, our classification project will help us identify that a little bit more and be able to share out then.
So let's Diane and then Brian. And Diane, you are talking to yourself again.
Again. Okay, now I don't want to get all doomsday planner on you, but I do want us all to think about, you know, we've got now software that can measure and does measure how long a student spends time on a question, what they go back to, what they look at on a screen, all those types of things. As we progress through this and we're vetting resources, I think we have to ask about that metadata as well. Biometric data, those types of things, because a company may say, we're using this information to better our product. We hear that a lot. But what about this stuff? What really is taking place with this? And when we have a student who wants to run for president 20 and 30 years down the line, will data like this impact them? And again, I don't want to be super like crazy and paranoid, but these are things I think that we need to think about for the future as well, regarding data sets that are being collected. We know we're being watched by Google. We know our every move is being tracked by somebody. How is this data going to be used? And I think that, you know, at this point, it's been the economic reasons. That's why all this tracking is taking place, but are there other nefarious reasons? And so we just need to be mindful as we move into the future.
Thanks, Diane. Brian?
Yeah, I would echo what Diane is saying, and I don't think you're being doomsday-ish. I think that's the reality now. Most districts are sending devices home with kids. There's data that is being collected on their every little behavior that we don't even realize that may be significant, and the ability to analyze and compute that data is increasing every year with the computing power and AI. The biometric stuff, it's already here. I mean, you have districts that are using biometric scans to have kids board a bus or on food service. They're using RFID cards to track kids in school. You know, there's geolocation services on their one-to-one devices, mainly meant to prevent theft or to find a device, but they're there. It's here. You know, and it's one thing to say, I lost your kid's name and some student records, but can you imagine telling a parent, well, I lost your kid's digital face? You know, we really have to have a conversation about what the future of biometrics is, what guardrails we can put on that, if it should be used at all. But I know there's districts that are doing it. They're using facial recognition software. In our district, we actually have a cleaning service that we installed retinal scanners. That's how they clock into work. So as those things kind of become more common in the private sector, they're going to creep into K-12, if not already.
And I just want to add one thing. I think there's you guys covered the biometrics, so I'm going to step away from that one and just go back to the basic information. And, you know, for me, and when I was working with teachers and still today, when I talk to people, it's like, if you would put that on an application for your kids to go to school, if you put it on an application for them to have access to, say, a savings account at a bank, that information should not be publicly available, right? That's not what you want to be sharing. So if you can get teachers to think about, would you share that with the, you know, the custodian at their school or your neighbors or if not, then don't share it. Like there's some common sense questions we can ask here to help with that, and then go off into the more concrete, you know, things that we're thinking about for the future also.
And I think to Diane's point earlier in the conversation, you may not give up all the data, you may give up just a portion of it, but teacher B may give up the other part of it. So it's important to make sure that you don't say, well, that it's this and this, but that one little piece isn't important. because they can't get enough. Well, maybe not today, down the road. So, all right, moving on to kind of a wrap-up question here, and we're gonna go in. We're gonna go with Melissa, then Brian, and Diane.
Time them because we're almost out of time.
All right, so we got 3 minutes each, guys. So, what advice would you give to other districts who are working to implement data privacy policies and procedures? Melissa, go.
All right. We've said this already, but start with training. We need to make sure everybody understands the basics and again, how they can help. In your district, review the available resources from PTAC, the data quality campaign, and our privacy resource page that we have put together for you. Start with the PTAC checklist. You can check them off initially, at least, to say, okay, I've reviewed this area and I know what we're doing and I know how we can improve. But that's a really good way to start. Take an inventory of what you have, determine next steps, make a plan. Look into these additional resources like the Trusted Learning Environment and SDPC, and let us know how we can help. We really want to be a partner with you in this journey, and we want to provide you with resources that can help all of you so that we can do this together. And if there's something we're missing, something else that we can add to the website, please let us know and be happy to do that.
Great, thanks, Melissa. So, Brian?
I'd say, make the commitment. If you're listening to this today, you're probably listening for a couple of reasons. Number one, you're looking for answers, or number two, you're very interested and you're kind of like me and you're always looking for new ideas. But if you're looking for a reason why, make the commitment to get involved and to do something. And also, Rome wasn't built in a day. You don't have to get every problem solved at once. I think what the DPI has rolled out with the Data Privacy Consortium is an excellent place to start. You can start there, start with vendors, develop your process. But it's hard to do that until you've had that discussion at the highest levels in your district about their commitment to doing this, and grow it from there. That's my best piece of advice.
Awesome. Thanks, Brian. Diane?
Brian, you used my Rome wasn't built in a day comment.
I steal everything from Green Bay, right?
Because it's true. As you look at school districts who, seem to be the leaders, you'll say, that's so much stuff. It took so long to do. How'd they do that all? And all I can say is break it off into small chunks. Melissa had some great advice regarding look at your current reality, starting with policy, probably. And move forward. It's an awareness thing. It's change management as well. It's very much a people thing versus a technology thing. And so helping people understand what the issues are, helping them, we always called it in Green Bay, step through their fears about it, and addressing those fears is important with change management and biting off small chunks. I think something that really helped me was that I found other colleagues throughout the United States and within the state to work together with, to bounce ideas off from, to share resources with. It's a good group of people who don't mind sharing the struggles that they've been through so that you don't have to go through those same struggles. So again, like I said, this is a people thing. And relying on your colleagues and the people who have been through this, I think would be helpful. And then lastly, following a framework like the Privacy Technical Assistance Center or the Trusted Learning Environment will help you just cover all the bases. Just make sure you give yourself time.
And I'm going to because we are just about out of time, there is 1 or 2 questions we did not get to. And so I want people to know that we will get the answers for those questions and add them to the document. And again, this will all be available. I've given you access to the slide deck. It was in the agenda that was sent to you with your invite to this, to the day. And also, we will probably be adding some of this to our DPI cybersecurity and privacy pages. So I don't want people to think we're ignoring your questions, but we will get you those answers.
Great, and we do have just a couple minutes. And one thing we did tease out a lot was mentioned was the Student Data Privacy Consortium. So I wonder, Annette, if you could just take a couple minutes, because you were very implemental in getting that done. Just kind of unpack that for a minute, and we'll talk about this more throughout the day too.
So the Student Data Privacy Consortium, and again, there is a link at the end of the slide deck for this, and we'll put a link also in the chat window for you, is a consortium of districts from across the country that have put together and worked with lawyers to come up with language that should be in all contracts with vendors that have access to student information. So any vendor that you are building a contract with, we now have a template contract with agreed upon language that has been approved by the DPI lawyers also that you can access. So log into the SDPC, request access if you don't already have it, and there is a templated contract there for you to use. It also includes an Appendix E. And if the vendor has signed Appendix E with Stevens Point, then you can use that. You don't even have to negotiate with that vendor. You can say, you signed this with Stevens Point, put your district's name on it, and now they're going to sign it for you. There's no negotiating, there's no conversation. They've agreed that they will abide by our student data privacy rules across the state. So that's one piece of the Student Data Privacy Consortium. A second is you can search for apps that you're considering and see, do they honor these privacy rules? Do they not? Who are they working with? That's how you can find your network. Oh, they worked with Diane, they worked with Brian. I'll call them and ask how that went or why the contract failed. And then finally, it has a new feature where you can share it with your teachers and have them put in the app and they can do the research. So it takes a little bit of the onus off you, and it also helps your educators to start learning. What are these apps doing? What are they giving away? So right now, those are the three main areas. Every district, every school in our state has full access and there's no cost to you. The DPI has paid the yearly fee and will continue to pay the yearly fee for all of our districts to have access. And again, if you have any questions, please be sure you can send them to me or anyone in this room, and or anyone who has a contract in the consortium.
Great, thanks. And that will certainly come up again throughout the day. So there'll be more conversation on student data privacy consortium, but thanks for pulling that out. With that, I'd like to take a minute and thank our panelists, Melissa, Brian, and Diane. Thanks for a great hour. That was fantastic. You guys are certainly thought leaders in this arena, and I appreciate your time.
Thank you.
And then with that, we are going to move into what will be our first break. So on the screen, you should see our timer, and we will start that up, and you will have a 15-minute break.